This is the case of Martha Moxley, proof that you never know who your neighbors are or who they might be. Even though you live in a gated community, does not always mean that you're safe. If you want to know more about this case, please continue watching.
You are watching Roll a Mile in My Shoes TV.
The evening of October 30th, 1975 started out just like any other day for 15-year-old Martha Moxley and her friends. They were going to go hang out and do normal things like teenagers did back then. But the next day, Martha's body would be found in her own backyard. Everyone who knew Martha Moxley always asked the question of who would want to kill this girl. She was a person who, when you always saw her, she had a smile on her face, and her friends and those who knew her said she had a bright and bubbly personality, and they couldn't understand why anyone would want to kill her. In fact, it was so much of a traumatizing event to all of the people or teenagers who knew her in the Greenwich community in Connecticut that a lot of people did not talk about the murder for many years, if at all. It is determined that when Martha's body was found later that day, after October 30th, she was found in her own backyard, and it is determined that she was bludgeoned to death with a golf club, and her underwear and jeans were pulled down around her knees. But according to Jack Solomon Easton, Connecticut's chief of police, there was no evidence of a sexual assault. The head of the golf club that was found 50 feet away from the portion of her driveway where she was believed to be accosted, it is believed that the portion of the shaft of the golf club that was used was later used as a weapon to stab her with. So this means that whoever decided that they were going to do whatever they did to her, they decided that they were going to take this golf club and beat this young lady in the head with it, which, was their plan. And then they used the other half of the golf club, which was the handle, once the golf club had broken, and they stabbed her with it. Now, it is really strange because, like I said in the beginning, these people lived in a gated community. So a lot of people who lived around there in that neighborhood who knew her believed that someone within that gated community had to be the person to do it. And if they didn't physically do it themselves, they knew who did. Now, the golf club that was used to murder Martha actually led the investigators to a family which was a prominent family in the community, and the club turned out to be part of a set belonging to the Skagel family. The Skagels lived across the street from the Moxleys. 15-year-old Michael Skagel told police he had been with Martha that night. 17-year-old Thomas Skagel was with her as well. Michael told police that at 9:30 he went with his two oldest brothers, John and Rush Jr., to give their cousin a ride home. Meanwhile, Thomas claimed he went home at 9:30 to do a report on Abraham Lincoln. The police estimated that Martha had been murdered between 9:45 and 10 p.m. But if Michael was in the car and Thomas was in his room, what happened to Martha Moxley on her short walk home? Now, I believe that even though they said that she was murdered at between 9:45 and 10 o'clock, I believe that the time might have been off by a few minutes, because it could have been a few minutes earlier or a few minutes later. And this is, going to play a big role in the evidence or the facts later. Even though Michael Skagel had admitted to being with Martha earlier that night, investigators would later found another suspect within the Skagel household, and this suspect would be 24-year-old Kenneth Littleton. And Littleton had just been hired as a live-in tutor for the Skagel children. He told police he heard noises outside the house sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m. Before he went outside, Littleton said he checked on the 7 Skagel children. According to Detective Solomon, Littleton claimed that four older boys, including Michael and Thomas, were not at home. And this is really, strange, because Michael told police that he was actually in his room around this time working on a report about Abraham Lincoln. So how could you be at home working on this report, but your live-in tutor checks on you and says that you and your other brothers were not home? So this makes his story already start to fall apart. But you also have to question the live-in tutor's motives, because he was getting paid to be not only a tutor, but kind of like a babysitter for these kids. So he probably would lie and cover up for them because the family was paying his salary, because his story was that he heard some noises coming from the bushes on the property, and that leaves were rustling, but he claimed that he didn't see anything at the time that he was out. Now, how would you say that you heard noises? And I don't think that you would hear leaves rustling if were in the house at first and then you went out. So what was something that was so loud that would make this man go outside and look to see what happened? Because I doubt that it was leaves, unless those bushes or leaves were right up against the room or window where he was at the time, which I'm pretty sure it wasn't. So what was so loud that it would grab this man's attention and make him go outside and see what was going on? That's another question that people have to ask too. The live-in tutor, Littleton, said he didn't see Thomas until 10:25 when he joined him in front of the TV. The other Skagel boys came home a half an hour later. And, this is really strange because, it doesn't really say much about, if this man, this live-in tutor, or I call him the live-in babysitter, had a criminal past or seen something that he shouldn't have and would make him need to or want to cover up for these boys, because it's kind of strange that, you really don't hear anything from, the parents or anything like that saying, well, I saw the boys, at around this time, time, and, that would help them decide that, maybe there's more to the story and we need to look at somebody else. Now, over the next several months, detectives interviewed more than 200 people and gave several polygraph exams. And out of those 200 people, one of those people was Thomas. Now, the first polygraph exam that he gave Thomas results were inconclusive, but the second polygraph Thomas passed. Now, my thing is, why was the first polygraph exam inconclusive, and why did you all agree to a second polygraph exam? Because I mean, this could give that kid time to think of, what his answers were going to be and things like that. So he could have been, you know rehearsing his answers, because he kind of already knew what the answers were going to be. And it kind of makes you wonder, why did they want to give him a second polygraph exam even though his first results were inconclusive? It's really weird because after months of cooperating with authorities, the Skagels, on the advice of their attorney, refused to answer any more questions in, relation to anything doing with Martha Moxley's case. And not to mention that, as I said before, this was a prominent family because they had family ties to the Kennedys. And Michael, one of the sons, or, all of the sons, is the cousin of Bobby Kennedy. So basically, he's also the cousin to, the president at one point, which was JFK. So you have to wonder if some of this played a part in why the authorities treated him and his brothers the way they did. Now, I might be wrong about, the reason why the police treated them the way they did is because of their family ties to the Kennedys. But you have to wonder, is this why police treated these boys with, care and kind of sort of, I guess you could say, kid gloves, because they didn't want to seem like or be known as the police officers or whoever to treat the extended family of the Kennedys, really harshly, because back then this could have been, a stain on the police department, so to speak, or just the officers that investigated this case in general. And you have to wonder, is that why they did this, investigation the way they did and handled it the way they did? Because I feel like if they would have taken a deeper look into these boys back then, the case wouldn't have taken so long to take the turn that it did. Martha's case was featured on the show Unsolved Mysteries, and tips from Unsolved Mystery viewers provided new information implicating Michael Skagel in the murder of Martha Moxley. 4 years after Martha was killed, Michael had been sent to a school in Maine for troubled teens called the Elan School. Over the course of his stay at Elan, several of Michael's classmates heard him confess to the killing. Based on this new information, 42-year-old Michael Skagel was charged with the murder. Prosecutors argued that the motive was sibling rivalry over Martha's affection. 27 years after the crime, Michael Skagel was convicted and sentenced to 20 years to life. The Skagel family appealed that conviction, and in May of 2018, the conviction was overturned. Now, this is another reason why I ask if their family ties to the Kennedys had something to do with it. Because, I mean, if it is, determined and evidence shows, which it did, that, Michael was potentially the one who bludgeoned Martha to death, why is it that after he was sentenced to 20 years, to life, did his conviction get overturned? And especially since they seen that the murder, I guess, came about because of sibling rivalry for her affection. And it's kind of crazy that things like this happen, especially in these gated communities and these prominent families. But I guess back then, since a lot of things were different than they are now, that was something that was common, that people even still today would kill over a woman or a girl, and because she might not have liked one brother over the other. I mean, it's kind of weird that that would happen, but it's kind of known to happen, many, many times over the course of many years, many decades, or even centuries. I mean, but, in this case, it's kind of weird because she was a 15-year-old. And even though these boys were, about the same age, but a few years older than her, it was kind of weird. But I guess that goes to show you sibling rivalry can cause all kinds of, bad situations with bad outcomes. And like I said in the beginning, you never know who your neighbors are or might be. And just because you live in a gated community does not mean that you're always safe. If you guys like this video, please don't forget to leave me a like. Comment your thoughts on this down in the comment section, and in any cases that you think that would be interesting for me to cover. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on the next one.